But let's start with this viewer suggestion. Terry Canfield is an author who periodically uploads video essays to YouTube. Every couple of months, it looks like she puts something out. I looked through some of her content, and baby, every one of it, fascinating. Every video is a smash in its own way. Here is our viewer suggestion, Terry Canfield, discussing what Plato has to do with the right-wing advantage in messaging. It's an interesting take. Let's have a look.
Hi and welcome. You probably clicked on this because Plato's in the title, but you'll have to wait for the good stuff because I'm going to start with political.
I'm going to tell you, Terry, if you're watching this later, and I'll be merciful and switch this. If you're watching this later, I clicked on it because you were in the title. A viewer recommended you. So you're getting popular, my friend.
Republicans have baked-in advantages. Politico reported that when Trump announced a rally in Florida with Rubio, but not DeSantis, the apparent snub angered some people within DeSantis' orbit who complained that it would mean fewer people would pay attention to DeSantis. This tells us that even with everything we know about Trump's lawbreaking and attempted coup, he is still hailed as the leader of the Republican Party, and the Republican leaders still line up to kiss his ring. A cherished theory has been circulating on social media since 2016, which goes like this. Trump keeps breaking laws because the Democrats are not doing enough to expose his lawbreaking or stop him. Another theory is that the whole problem is that the Democrats are bad at messaging. I propose instead a two-part theory. First, the Republican Party supports Trump because he's a lawbreaker and insurrectionist, and the Republican Party controls an effective disinformation machine.
Okay, so I'm just going to tell you where I disagree with her good and early so that we can contrast as we go along. And I don't want to discount the information she provides in this video. I do think that it's worthwhile, and we're going to listen to all of it because it's not that long of a video, and it's also fascinating. But where we disagree, I think that what she's saying is true, and the criticism of the Democratic Party is also true, and it was more true in 2016. Yes, I do think that Republicans lie because their base wants them to lie. I think that's accurate. I do think it is more difficult to talk about the truth and to talk about reality because it requires dealing with logistics and boring stuff, and you can't just hand wave it as, oh, the Jews are out to get you. Those scary, I don't know, readers of the Talmud. I don't know what's supposed to be scary about them, but they can't just hand wave that. Agreed on that part, but the 2016 Democrats were weak sauce. The 2023 Democrats are slightly less weak sauce. And it's not, you can talk about the broad strokes of a policy and direct people to where they can get the details if they're interested. They do need to work on messaging. It shouldn't be impossible to communicate good governance. And if we really do have that problem, then the argument for liberal arrogance, left-wing arrogance is correct. If we really think people are so simple that they are unable to understand a good message when it's put out there, if we really think that, then the arrogance accusations are correct. And you know what? They partially are. They partially are. We need to give people more credit than we do. That said, her overall point, I think, is a fair one. It is an advantage for the GOP that they don't have to, they're not beholden to silly things like reality. But my only counterpoint is that that doesn't mean that Democrats have to concede that whenever we talk about policy, it's going to be boring. No. You just need to focus on the same things that Republicans focus on. Do Republicans focus on the details of their nonsense? No. What do they focus on? what they are going to do for the American people. They're lying about it, but we need to focus on the things that we are telling the truth about. So focus on the outcomes rather than the boring structure to get there. That's all I'm saying.
These two things go together. The way to build an effective anti-democratic party is by creating an effective disinformation machine.
True.
Democracy requires truth and an intact public sphere. All the jurors have to share the same set of facts, or rule of law won't work. Autocracy relies on myths and lies like this: vote for me and I will keep you safe from your enemies. You can see right away that the Republicans have a few advantages. Advantage number one: a liar can create great sound bites. The truth is always more complex. According to the messaging has to be simple theory, if you have to explain, you lose. For example, Ted Cruz said, "Why is it only Democrat blue cities that take days to count their votes? The rest of the country manages to get it done on election night." The truth is that more Democrats vote by mail, and mail-in ballots take longer to count because with in-person voting, the carrying and checking happens when the voter votes.
See, Terry Canfield right there. You're not being boring when you explain this. I think the only flaw in her argument is that she's discrediting how good communicators like her can be. We're just used to seeing CNN Democrats prattle on and on and on, intentionally trying to be boring, intentionally trying to be bad communicators, because they know accurately communicating most of their policy, most corporate Democrat policy, will reveal it to be what it is, which is simply more pro-corporate nonsense. I think she's being plenty entertaining with how she's, plenty sufficient with how she's explaining.
Mail-in ballots, the process happens after the ballot arrives, which delays the counting. Most states look at postmarks. Therefore, they accept ballots that arrive late if the ballot was postmarked on time. The Republican-controlled state legislature of Pennsylvania passed laws forbidding early ballots to be counted before election night, enabling people like Ted Cruz to spread that lie.
So here's how you address that, how you make that more interesting. When you're putting that out, when you're on MSNBC or CNN or NBC or ABC, or even if you manage to be a Democrat that gets on to Fox and you're responding to that, you say what she just said, but you follow it up with, why did the other guy feel the need to lie to you about that? Are you telling me that the other guy was unaware of these facts, that there was nobody in their campaign that could explain to them how this works? They're lying to you. Why do they feel the need to lie to you? Because they can't win in a fair fight. And suddenly it's interesting again.
The truth teller then has to explain that Ted Cruz is setting up the Republicans to accuse the Democrats in blue cities of cheating because it takes longer to count those votes, thereby repeating what happened in 2020 and deliberately undermining the integrity of elections. See the problem? Lying is easy. The liar has the freedom to make the lie super interesting and to play to the audience's fears and biases.
And all I'm saying is that the truth teller then has the obligation to make the truth interesting.
The truth is always more complex and nuanced and boring. This brings me to a...
Yes, more complex. Yes, more nuanced. No, not necessarily more boring. That is where skill comes in. That is where we need Barack Obama style ability to communicate to people with Bernie Sanders policy.
Advantage number two: destroying is easier than building.
True.
An anti-federal government movement has been taking root in the Republican Party for decades. In the 1990s, we saw the rise of anti-government militias. When Steve Bannon talks about the deep state, he means the rules and regulations put in place since the New Deal. When Steve Bannon talks about destroying the deep state, he means dismantling the laws that he doesn't like. You can either roll back federal powers slowly through systematic deregulation, as the Republicans have been doing for decades, or you can bring in a wrecking ball. Trump is a wrecking ball. Trump supporters are on board with his wrecking ball tactics because they don't believe the federal government represents them.
She is nailing this. I 100% agree with Canfield here.
They think the federal government is helping others replace them. The Confederates were opposed to the federal government because the federal government wanted to end slavery. Segregationalists were opposed to the federal government because the federal government wanted to end racial segregation. People want to cheat and steal are opposed to the federal government because the federal regulations put in place since the New Deal outlaw things like money laundering and price fixing. Confederate sympathizers and segregationalists are still with us. Now they call themselves Republicans. In 2018, I wrote an article for Slate magazine entitled, "Why Trump Supporters Will Believe Any Lie He Tells." Drawing on research from psychologists, I argued that they're lying on purpose because they know the lies destroy. It's just another way of being an insurrectionist. This brings me to advantage number 3.
Okay, on advantage number 2, no notes. That's exactly accurate. I would only say that does also, though, create an advantage for the far left. The far left has an advantage here because the fears Trump speaks to, the fears these people appeal to, actually are being addressed by leftist policy. And it becomes our job, people who are actually looking at this seriously, becomes our job to figure out how to pitch it in an entertaining way. And yes, we have more restrictions, but we also have one glorious advantage in all of it, which is that the numbers bear out our arguments. So we just need to be as charismatic in our pitches for the truth and just trust that the fact checkers then, when it gets to that point, if it gets to that point, if it comes down to, okay, we are arguing as charismatically as they are, well, when you go have a peek at the numbers every single time, W's for the L's. W's for the lefties.
Their audience, authoritarians,
I apologize for that being forced.
need simple messaging. After World War II, political psychologists like Theodor Adorno asked whether there were authoritarian character traits. In his book, The Authoritarian Personality, from 1950, Adorno described the traits of the authoritarian personality, also known as the anti-democratic personality. Today's political psychologists have continued the work and have defined authoritarian personality as, among other things, having a low tolerance for complexity, which includes diversity and globalization. Political psychologist Karen Stenner calls them simple-minded avoiders of complexity. It should be clear that if you're speaking to an audience of simple-minded avoiders of complexity, the message, Democrats bad, Republicans good, can work. It also seems clear to me that a more sophisticated audience is not going to tolerate that kind of messaging.
No. Let me jump back. Here we disagree again. And by the way, I'm so delighted to disagree on this level. We don't fundamentally disagree about what's going on. This is the kind of political debate I ache for. I yearn for. This is the kind of political debate that makes me so happy. It's a disagreement about how best to help people, how best to show people the truth. So let me pause this real quick and say I looked through Terry Canefield's other videos. First of all, this video on its own, incredibly valuable. Before I disagree with the fine points, I'm not disagreeing with her assessment of the right at all. I think it's dead on. And that's ultimately what this video is about. It's more about the right. I'm just saying I have a different view on how the left can react to this, adjust to this playing field. Let me also say all of her videos are informative in some way. All of her videos that I saw, I looked through 5, I think, brought to light something I hadn't really considered before. When she's talking about Plato as it relates to authoritarian messaging here, I agree. Where we disagree is that for somehow the left can't do simple messaging, and that people on the left will be adverse to simple messaging. I disagree. People on the left will be adverse to untrue messaging. There's a huge difference there. You can say your message simply. You can acknowledge that the issue you're talking about is more complex than you can explain in one sitting even. But websites exist. Go to my website at blank for more. If you want the finer points of your argument spelled out somewhere, cool. Put them on there. But boil your message down to everybody, something everybody can enjoy. She's also, in my opinion, not addressing one other kind of American here, which is also, in my opinion, the most prominent of the voting populace, which is people that don't have all damn day. If you don't, I'll tell you from also a sales background, God help me, red right hand of the devil once upon a time. If you don't understand your product well enough to explain it in simple terms, you're not going to have an easy time selling it. If you can only talk about why X cell phone plan is better than Y cell phone plan in terms of these little contract details that require you to pause and look up the difference every 5 minutes, you've lost the sale because you don't have the confidence in it, and it shows. But if you can speak broadly about it and then answer questions in detail when they are asked to you, that has a very different effect. I would recommend that. I would recommend working on, and I'm saying this for the people who are going to be running for office or talking to people who run for office or advising people or working on their campaigns. It's all plausible with this crowd. Make sure that you are pushing for a simplified version of whatever you're talking about. There should be the Cliff Notes version that you can give any American who just worked a 50, 60-hour week. They're already exhausted. They don't want to go do more work, and they don't want to listen to an hour-long lecture, he said 20 minutes into the recording. Boil it down to a simpler message. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't only have a simple policy in mind. Have a full policy in mind that you have a quick pitch for, an elevator pitch.
America has a history of authoritarianism. Slavery was autocratic. Racial segregation was autocratic. The idea that women belong in the home and are basically baby making and men serving machines is autocratic. One thing that has happened as the political parties have realigned is that the authoritarians have congregated in the Republican Party. This gives Republicans yet another advantage. Their audience needs simple messaging. Okay, you might ask, what about moderate Republicans, those who are not racist and who do not cheer violence? This brings me to another Republican advantage. The truth cannot penetrate the right-wing, hermetically sealed disinformation universe. During the first televised hearing of the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack, Benny Thompson said, Donald Trump oversaw and directed a coordinated, multi-step effort to overturn an election.
Only thing I'm going to disagree with here, the truth has not penetrated. I believe it can. It can indeed penetrate it. But she put this out 4 months ago, and let's go easy on that. Also, the point she's getting into is good. I shouldn't be talking right now.
Liz Cheney said, Trump knew his effort to overturn the election was illegal and unconstitutional. He did it anyway. It seems to me that Liz Cheney and Thompson can't be faulted for bad messaging. Their messages were simple, clear, direct, powerful. But Jim Jordan responded with, real America doesn't care about the January 6th committee. Gas is over $5 per gallon. Jim Jordan and his Republican friends then went on to blame Biden for high gas prices. Think about what Jim Jordan did. Now, a truth teller looks at the facts and makes sure his statements reflect the facts. A liar ignores the facts and creates the narrative that he wants to be true. The idea is that it doesn't matter what the truth is as long as enough people believe it. For this technique to work in the political arena, the liar needs a well-oiled propaganda loop and hermetically sealed disinformation ecosystem. And guess what? That's exactly what the Republicans have. Now, this brings me to another advantage. Advantage number 5. Authoritarians fall in line. Non-authoritarians tend to splinter. If you have a smaller group, but they all fall in line and do what they're told, you have an advantage over a big tent group of non-authoritarian free thinkers. You may still be thinking, yeah, but Democrats can still be bad at messaging. Okay, let's look at some recent examples. On Thursday, a federal judge, Judge Jackson, warned that today the dark shadow of tyranny still threatens democracy, as she issued the second longest sentence to a January 6th rioter. The dark shadow of tyranny still threatens democracy, coming from a federal judge, seems to me like a strong message. But nobody's talking about the criminal trials of the insurrectionists, possibly because there are so many that people are overloaded. As of October 17th, at least 928 people have been indicted for participating in the attack on the Capitol. But remember, each time Trump tweeted something outrageous or racist or shocking, everybody talked about it for days. That's because demagoguery works. Outrageousness is rewarded. Demagogues steal the show and dominate the stage. Rule of law and the normal functioning of a democracy is boring in comparison. It's harder for people to pay close attention to boring. Another problem.
Very, very true. It's in its essence, I agree with that argument. It's harder for people to pay attention to boring stuff, and real solutions tend to be more boring. But if you go in knowing that, I think you have an opportunity to spice it up. Doesn't mean lie about it. Just means you talk about the consequences of failing to push the correct policy. I would point out the SVB bank fiasco. What a great cause and effect, and the difference between administrations. You had policies loosened in 2018 under Trump. We have the consequences now. The very policies that were pushed for by SVB. You can pitch that in a fun way. I'll also say, great job, Terry Canfield right here. She has pointed out a massive weakness that Republicans have. Because she's right. They don't deal with the nitpicking. They don't deal with the infighting that is truly core to the left. Case in point, here's a video where I'm praising this gal, and I've been not disagreeing. I've been arguing every little point the whole way. That's an advantage, because when the Republicans put up a policy right now, or when they put up a message right now, it really doesn't matter what the message is. She's right. They all fall in line. But that also means when something like this Dominion suit happens, it's like a organism that doesn't have enough diversity in its cells. It's like those lizards that are all essentially the same lizard. That's going to sound insane. It's like a species that doesn't have enough genetic diversity to resist a disease. It just wipes out their whole point. Another example would be the Social Security fiasco, because they had no way to truly address criticism of it, because they hadn't been approaching it in what they saw as a problem in a very diverse way. And they hadn't dealt with a lot of internal criticism. So that is both an advantage that Republicans have right now and a disadvantage that they have. So long as we view it properly, we can use it to get them, particularly in debate season. We just need to make sure we've got strong debaters up there.
The problem is that we're undergoing a disruption in how we get our information. In his
True.
YouTube video series, Snyder Speaks, Yale history professor Timothy Snyder compares the internet to the invention of the printing press. These rapid changes in how we get information require a period of adjustment as people learn to separate misinformation from disinformation and facts. We live in a 24/7 news cycle in which media outlets compete for clicks, and consumers of news are bombarded with a constant stream of headlines, snippets, and opinions. The result is that droplets of facts are lost in the cascade of irrelevant information and baseless opinions. The two theories, that the problem is that the Democrats are bad at messaging and that the Democrats haven't done enough to stop or draw attention to Republican lawbreaking, have something in common. Both blame the Democrats for Republican lawbreaking.
Ooh.
Now at last.
So, despite all I said, where I was saying that, well, that is true. Well, the Republican issue was also true. I'm going to give a big nod to Canfield here. If you want to talk about where the actual fault lies, no, the fault lies in the bad guys. Yelling at the cops with broomsticks for legs might be a fair thing to do when discussing what went wrong with this bank robbery where the bank robbers escaped. But let's not forget, it's the bank robber's fault still. She's totally right here. It's the fault of Republicans that are willing to lie like this, ultimately. And nitpicking the Democrats, I think, does have value, and I think does make the Democrats stronger. I think that's why we actually have a robust, in the House, for example, you've seen Democrats just tearing the MAGA House members to bits. But she's right. Let's not forget who's actually the telling lies in this scenario. It ain't the Democrats. It really never was the Democrats to the degree that certainly MAGA does it. But I would say that the Republicans have always done it.
Last we come to Plato. Plato argued that democracy is inferior to various forms of monarchy, aristocracy, and even oligarchy because democracy tends to undermine the expertise necessary for the proper governance of societies. According to Plato, most people don't have the kind of intellectual talents that enable them to think well about the difficult issues that politics involves. Hence, Plato concludes that the state will be guided by very poorly worked out ideas that experts in manipulation and mass appeal use to help themselves win office. In other words, Plato's theory is that democracy is fragile because the person who is an expert in manipulation and mass appeal will win, not the person best equipped to govern. In the words of Angie Hobbs, a professor at the University of Sheffield, Plato's theory of the flaws in democracy provided a chilling account of how democracy can be subverted into tyranny by an opportunist demagogue. It's easy to stir people's emotions. Demagogues have advantages, particularly in the kind of information disruption that we're experiencing now. I talked about all the Republican advantages. The pro-democracy, pro-truth party has one advantage which, if used, will constantly give the pro-democratic party the upper hand. There are more of us than them.
Hell yeah.
People who want democracy vastly outnumber the people who don't, which brings me to this question. Do you have a plan for voting?
Get 'em.
No, we did not commit doggy voter fraud. We had one ballot between us. It was easy because JJ is a Democrat.
What an ending. I love it. Yeah, so I agree on almost all points. I was strong in what I disagree about in the beginning. I do think there is a lot of value in busting the balls, for lack of a better term, of Democrats, particularly when they drop the ball on layups, on real easy political issues. When they fail to point out how Republican legislation hurts America. Yeah, you should absolutely expect more from Democrats. If they can't make a pitch for Medicare for all, for God's sake, when there are people that are going broke over medical debt, come on, that's an easy pitch. But all that said, ultimately, I agree with the advantages she laid out for the GOP in that video. I agree with her conclusion. Despite the inherent difficulties in democracy for dealing with demagoguery, there is ultimately more people who are interested in the truth. Even if you look at QAnon, as misguided as they are, as wrong as they are, as duped as as all Q followers are, they are attempting, in their own strange way, to find the truth. We, do need to make the pitch for the truth better. B, need to take advantage of the fact that there are indeed more of us. And C, one thing I feel like was sort of glossed over there is the presence of the internet, the presence of mass communication getting easier and easier. What Plato didn't have in his time was a way for every single person to get every single piece of information they need to be informed. We have that now. We need to take advantage of it. The bad guys who want to disinform, they do take advantage of it. We don't as much. So that has got to be part of our toolbox. The YouTuber is Terry Canfield. Link in the description to that video. From there, you can check out her channel, and I recommend it. She's fantastic. Good recommendation from a viewer that is highly appreciated. What you can do, show the cause and effect of left versus right policy as it was shown to us through Silicon Valley Bank, SVB. I included the link to the Majority Report's covering of that. In the VOD, I'll include the link to our covering of the Majority Report's covering of that if you'd prefer. But regardless, show that because it's an obvious example of what happens under left governance versus right. Catherine Wolf says, all right, love Terry. We'll have to work her into my journey. Yeah, absolutely. I'll feature her from time to time. She has been added to my list of interesting folks. Really, to get on that list, all you have to do is bring something of value to the conversation. Take an honest look at a problem and give your best pitch for how to solve it. By the way, if anybody has suggestions for people we should have a look at, let us know at wickednetwork.com/contact. We're always looking for more people to feature on the channel.